Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our live broadcast. Tonight we're looking at Anguttara Nikaya Book of Fours, 93 to 95, 92 to 94. Actually, mainly 93. We're looking at, it's a good example of the teachings of the Buddha on the two aspects of meditation, the two main aspects of meditation practice. And there's the aspect of tranquility and the aspect of insight, clear sight, clear vision, vipassana. So these we often refer to as samatha and vipassana. Here the Buddha specifies ajjatang jeto samatha. Means samatha means tranquility. Ajjatang jeto samatha means inner tranquility of mind, or inner mental tranquility. Being internally composed. And the other one is adipanya dhamma vipassana. Insight into reality with higher wisdom. But in brief, tranquility and insight. It's important to understand these as the two aspects of meditation. The Buddha says some people gain tranquility but don't gain insight. Some people gain insight but don't gain tranquility. Some people don't gain either, don't have either. And some have both. So there are certain types of meditation practice, and there are certain meditators who only practice leading to tranquility, for example. There's many meditations of this sort. Any meditation that doesn't focus on reality. You could, well, not any, but any beneficial meditation. A lot of meditation outside of the Buddha's teaching is only for the purpose of gaining tranquility. There are meditations which are meant to lead to other things, but for the most part, they base themselves around tranquility. Any meditation that fixes on a single imaginary object, so conjured up in the mind, or even on a physically apparent object, maybe a sight or a sound. Usually a sight, but it could very well be a sound. There are people who have meditations based on sounds. But the idea is to focus on the concept. So when you look at a candle, you're focusing on it as being something, being a flame. If you focus on a color, you're focusing it on being that color. You're not focusing on the experience of seeing it. You're not meditating on the experience. So you're not meditating on reality exactly. Any meditation that's focused on beings, so loving kindness meditation, friendliness, what we call metta, or compassion, karuna. All these types of meditation only have as the goal calming the mind. Or they only exist in this classification. They're only in the tranquility side. They can lead to other things, magical powers. They can lead to insight into things like past lives or the thoughts of others, seeing or hearing things far away, that kind of thing. A lot of magical things. But they can't teach you about reality. So a person who practices these might gain a very powerful mind. Of course, there are yogis and mystics in other traditions that have very powerful minds. But it has no bearing on reality. So when you come back down to earth, when you stop meditating, there can be great defilement lying dormant underneath your tranquility. Because you haven't come to understand, you've just come to avoid. You're able to transcend. But transcending is a temporary affair. It doesn't last, and you come back down to earth. The other type of meditation is where you muck around in the mundane, which is actually much more uncommon. You don't want to get the impression that both of these are equal. They're actually quite different. And insight meditation is special. Tranquility meditation is not so special. In the sense that it's not something that is only found in Buddhism. It's quite special. It's not as special. It's not special in the same way as insight meditation. Only the Buddha taught insight meditation. Or maybe that's not even fair, but only the Buddha taught insight meditation leading to enlightenment. So you could argue that there are certainly mystics and yogis who learn something about reality. They don't get very far, but potentially there's an ability to practice both. Regardless, it's not an important argument. It's important to understand the difference. So insight into reality, Dhamma vipassana, it's still more special because it's lasting. It's something that's more real. The fix is, the solution is more natural. But there are some people who practice it without gaining any sort of tranquility. And that can be a problem, because they find themselves overwhelmed by the incredibly unpleasant nature of reality. It's unstable, chaotic. If your mind is not stable, it's not focused, if you were to just go off and try to note things, right? Take this tradition. This is why we tell people not to just note things one after the other. You can easily work yourself up, and you don't ever gain the tranquility necessary to see things deeply and to really understand things. You don't gain the clarity of mind, the richness, the fullness of the experience. It's a superficial insight, because your mind is not steadied, it's not composed. So that's why we give people a meditation technique. We have them always come back again to the stomach, and then we watch various points on the body, that kind of thing. But it's something to keep you stable and to cultivate a stability to your insight, to not go back into the idea of focusing on a concept. You don't need to focus on a concept to tranquilize the mind, but you need some structure to your meditation. So this is why we give these exercises. We put people through a course. They're going through, this is why we do walking meditations, one step being right, 1 foot at a time, and then increasing through the course. We keep it rather formalized, because it helps compose the mind, tranquilize the mind. And so the Buddha rightly says that someone who's just practicing samatha meditation should, use that as the base, and then apply their mind to gain insight. Someone who's just gained insight should use that as a base and focus on tranquilizing the mind. Someone who's got neither, the Buddha says, they should think of themselves as a person. They should think like a person with their head on fire, or their clothes or their head on fire. They should put forth, and let's look at the Pali. Chando cha vayamo cha usaho cha usolhi cha apatiwani cha sati cha sampajanan janyan cha karaniyam. I like the Pali here is because there's lots of qualities that one should cultivate. But without either, if one is in real dire straits, without any tranquility or insight, then one needs to do some work. And just as if their head is on fire, they should put forth great zeal, the chanda, vayama, great effort, usaha is another word for effort, but it means like fortitude, resolve. Apatiwani cha, zeal, another word for zeal. Wonder if that's actually a negative. It looks like a negative to me. Right. Patiwana means shrinking. So they should put forth the quality of not shying away. They should be gung-ho, we might say. Sati, they should have mindfulness or remembrance. They should remember themselves, remember the present moment. Sampajanya, they should have clear comprehension or clear knowledge. Karaniyang, this should be done by them. Sayatapi bhikkhave adita jelova adita sisova. Just as if monks, there were someone with their clothes on fire, or their head on fire. Taseva jelasava sisasava nibbapanaya adimatam. For that person, they would exert themselves to put out that fire on their clothes or on their head in the same way. As for someone who has both, the Buddha said, use them both as a base and work for the greater, because it isn't a sign that things are done, it's just a sign that you're on the right path. Even someone who has both tranquility and insight, that's not in and of itself a certain, it's not in and of itself a description or a certainty that the person is enlightened. But you need to use both of these. Once you have both of them and you don't have just tranquility or you don't have just insight without keeping your mind focused through the practice. And you have to use them both and increase them both. Desu yeva kusalesu dhammesu patitaya, based on those wholesome Dhammas, uttari asavanankayaya yogo karaniyo. One should cultivate yoga. We have this in the word yoga again, but here is one should cultivate the endeavor for further destruction of defilement. So there's a acknowledgement that having these is already destroying the defilements, and with these you've already come a long way in reducing your defilements through insight, through tranquility, through seeing things as they are. But the work for such a one is to continue, is to further their practice and continue on the way. So this is, there's a big debate over this because people have different ideas of what this means, and the Buddha talks about these things called jhanas. Jhana meaning meditation, but there are 4 distinct levels of meditation that the Buddha talks about, and they can be interpreted either through the lens of insight or through the lens of tranquility, and there's a big debate over which is which and which the commentary means, and people try to put the commentaries and the Theravada tradition, and anyway, there's this whole big debate that some of you might be familiar with. I like this sort of teaching here, and I don't, it's clear the Buddha didn't debate this sort of thing too much, but he did try to point out that there are these 2 qualities, and clearly the best is when they're both together. You wouldn't want to have just one or the other. I think a lot of people don't realize that much meditation is just in one category or the other, usually in the tranquility side, because people can gain magical powers not being Buddhist, but you can't gain wisdom, not true wisdom, unless you're practicing in line with the Buddha's teachings. So it's important not to cling to your tranquility. When you practice and your mind becomes tranquil, becomes calm, it's important not to cling to that. But at the same time, it's important not to get too caught up in insight and investigation, and without tranquilizing the mind, otherwise you just become distracted and it's superficial, and it can lead to distraction and mental fomentation. Anyway, so a little bit of Dhamma today. There's our Dhamma for this evening. Now we'll go on to questions.
Hi Bhante, how's my audio?
Good. I'll just unmute you there.
Oh, okay.
Just give me 1 second here. Let's make sure this is on, right?
Sure.
No, it's not. Okay, so I've got to make sure you... Okay, go ahead and say something.
Okay, can you hear me now, Bhante?
Yes. Monitor, no, but why is it quieter? Oh, because these aren't on 100%. I see. Okay, I think we're good.
Okay. In the past, I've done things that I regret, and a lot of people know about it. What can I do to stop caring about what people think of me and move on in my life?
Stop caring what people think about you. Well, insight meditation, I mean, this practice is just incredible for that, really. But sometimes it takes a affirmation on your part. You have to remind yourself and say, look, this is all just, this isn't real. There's no... The worst thing that could happen is I'll die, or the worst thing that, thinking about all these things that could happen, and they may just happen, and they're just things. There's this book that my mom gave me once, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff, and it's all small stuff. One of these modern Buddhist books, pretty good book. And when Buddhism puts everything in perspective, it is all small stuff. What people think about you is not life-threatening, and even if it was, then it would just be your life. Probably the best view to take is that what other people think of you doesn't make you a good or a bad person. So because good or bad, being good or bad, being wholesome or unwholesome, that's really kind of important. So you have to ask yourself, what's most important? The most important is wholesomeness and unwholesomeness, good and evil. What other people think about you doesn't affect that. So what I'm saying is sometimes it's good to remind yourself of what's important. And this is the stepping back and reflecting. It's not meditation, but it's sometimes useful. But ultimately, it's the meditation that helps you realize this, helps you realize that none of that's significant. When you start to see people as just experiences, then certainly it doesn't matter what they think of you, because there's no they. The thought that pops into their head is it's just an experience. I mean, there's no quick fix to any of these problems that, so many of the problems that people come and ask. It's a matter of learning and understanding and letting go. And insight meditation is definitely for that. Your mind starts to relax, you stop freaking out. The thoughts that come up when you regret are just thoughts. And so most important is that you recognize them as just thoughts, memories. If you feel upset about them, then you have to note that you're upset. You can't stop them from coming up, and for the most part in the beginning you can't stop getting upset about it. But as you watch and as you look, your mind starts to see, and that's sort of what you're seeing now, is how unpleasant it is. And the more you see how unpleasant it is, the more clearly you see how unpleasant it is, the more quickly you learn to not do that, to not stress about what people think about you. Meditation is just kind of an acceleration of the learning process, because you learn things in life. We learn lessons based on the stress that things cause us. So this is why older people tend to be more, what would you say, moderate, less prone to outburst, because they've come to see that it doesn't bring any benefit. But they've seen slowly, and their vision is just a lot less clear than through meditation practice.
Bhante, is it possible to use Pali as an everyday communication language? As a monk who travels abroad, have you ever faced a situation where you had to communicate in Pali with another monk who didn't speak English or Thai?
I have, and my Pali is not nearly good enough to do so, but I've used it to say a few words to Burmese monks, Sri Lankan monks. I think there was even one case where I did try to talk to a monk who knew Pali. Ajahn Tong does this. He did this with a Burmese monk who came a Sri Lankan monk who came with us to see him. And this Sri Lankan monk spoke good English, but no Thai. Of course, Ajahn Tong doesn't speak English. So he started speaking to him in Pali, and the Sri Lankan monk was like, I don't speak Pali. He just assumed, because a lot of Sri Lankan monks are quite clever in Pali. But Ajahn Tong can say a few sentences and speak a little bit. He's actually cultivated it. We put together some monks in Thailand put together a textbook for learning conversational Pali. And I have that. It would be really neat I've never had a chance to actually use it, but it'd be something to go through and actually learn how to talk. You need a group of people. One time we tried a long time ago, I tried this with some people on the internet, posting chat messages. So someone would post a sentence on like a wiki, and then the next person would post a response. So you could do it on your own time, at your own leisure. And it really was helpful for me to take the time to compose conversational sentences. Of course, the only other person that really got into it wasn't very good at it, and I mean, I wasn't that good, but he was substantially worse, and then he gave up. But that would be something, to have some sort of group where we actually tried. I've talked about it on our Pali. We have this high-level Pali study list, but they're all PhDs and professors and a few monks, mostly very busy, and I never was able to get anyone really interested in it.
I have noticed an immediate effect in how I am less reactive to my teacher's laughter of me, to the point where it no longer has a lasting effect. In class, during their laughter, I mindfully note the subsequent impurities that arise, the anxiety, the sadness, the anger, as well as the desire to change or control their laughter. I believe it would be best for me to, sorry, I believe it would be best for me to continue to meditate on the impurities that arise from their laughter rather than try to control or change it. Wouldn't you think it would be wisest for me to meditate on the desire to change and control their laughter and on all the subsequent impurities rather than act upon the impure, unwholesome desire? Wouldn't that give the best result for vipassana practice in order to become content with reality rather than try to control it?
I don't understand the wouldn't. I mean, of course. Yes, the answer is yes, but have I ever taught it? It sounds like you're saying, well, no, probably not. But if that's just a straight up question, then absolutely that sounds very much like you're understanding what we're trying to do.
Sometimes in lying meditation, my breaths elongate such that they become long. I know the principle of uncontrollability, impermanence, and unsatisfactoriness, and so would long breaths, as in naturally occurring long breaths, not be an issue? In addition, sometimes I do not feel like doing sitting meditation, so would it be fine to mix sitting meditation up with lying meditation? I don't see why it would be a problem if I'm still carrying out the practice of mindfulness, though in different postures.
Yeah, you notice, you know that you're actually practicing meditation when you don't really have any questions, when you're able to answer all your questions. It sounds to me that you know what you're doing. And those are not issues. Go for it.
My mind keeps wandering into past regrets. What can I do about it? I tell myself to stop thinking about it, but I can't help it.
You're starting to understand this idea of non-self. Telling yourself to stop thinking doesn't make this thinking stop. That's not how thoughts work. Thoughts are not self. And that's what that means. What you're experiencing is exactly what the Buddha meant by non-self or not self. So it's not about doing anything about it. It's about learning not to try to do things about it. Now, your mind is wandering. Let's be clear about what's happening. Thoughts of the past are arising. That's a much clearer way of saying it. Based on those thoughts of the past, there arises subsequent regret, which maybe even clearer than that would be disliking. You wouldn't think of it as disliking, but that's what it is. There's a disliking of the thought, or a disliking of the concept behind the thought, but a disliking nonetheless. And if you look at it that way, it's actually quite easy to deal with. The thoughts are not a problem. It's the disliking of them. So if you say to yourself, thinking, it's not a problem for those thoughts to come up again and again and again. But you're able to free yourself from the disliking them because you don't see them in that way. You don't see them as regrets. You see them just as thoughts. Whereas it takes training, and it's actually you have to be quite quick to catch it. But you can also catch the regret. So if you feel disliking of the thought, say to yourself disliking or sad or angry, however it appears to you. But absolutely, this is what you're starting. This is if you're practicing the meditation as we practice here. This is exactly what you should see. That you can't stop your mind from thinking about whatever it wants to think about. That's the habit. It's this habitual nature of the mind. All you can do is start to change your habits, specifically the habit of regretting things, getting upset about things. And how you do that is by seeing it clearly, by watching and seeing how much stress you're causing yourself. And slowly your mind starts to change as it sees how much stress it's causing itself. But there's another problem here, is the stress that you're causing yourself by trying to control, trying to stop yourself from thinking. That affirms the disliking of the thoughts. This trying to get rid of them is just reaffirming the dislike of them, the regret, as you say. It's also creating stress because you can't get rid of them. And so you should just stop that. See that. In fact, that in and of itself is a habit, and it's a very strong habit in a beginner meditator. So that's one of the first things that you start to see you have to let go of, is this need to control everything, because it's causing a lot of stress and suffering. How do you do that? Well, you can't force yourself to stop forcing. You just have to, as already stated, you have to see it as how much stress it's causing you. And once you see how much stress and suffering it's causing you, you'll start to let go of that.
What can one do about the fear of having a bad reputation or failure?
I'm not sure now, have you actually started meditating in this tradition? If you haven't, there's 19 hours ago, this person might not even be there. If you haven't, I would recommend start by reading my booklet, and you would just note to yourself, afraid.
Bhante, what is the world of sankharas that is mentioned as one of the three worlds, others being the world of space and the world of beings?
Sankhara means formation, so this refers to the world of experiences. Experiences is one way of looking at the world. The three worlds are ways of looking at the world. Akasa Loka is looking at the world from a physics point of view. Satta Loka is looking at the world from a point of view of beings, or realms of beings. Sankhara Loka is looking at the world from a point of view of experience. So Sankhara is something that is formed, or is real, you could say, that arises. They're called formations, but really what they are is sabhava dhamma, dhammas that have existential phenomena. I translate that as things that exist. They arise and they cease. Like beings and space doesn't really exist. It's just a concept, but it's based on experiences. So each experience is formed from other experiences, or it's formed from causes and conditions. So it's called a sankhara. But what that is referring to is experiential reality.
Regarding your Ask a Monk video on addiction, attachment to entertainment, how should I then spend my time? I have decided to terminate a lot of my stimulation, removing the games from my phone, including Sudoku and word search, as I understand this to create states of attachment and addiction, and thus discontent. Would the stimulation from casual mobile puzzle games interfere with my progress in Vipassana meditation in becoming content with the ultimate reality? Or will I still be able to eventually and naturally give these things up without first doing so, and continue to progress in Vipassana?
Those things will slow your progress. So yeah, you can, it doesn't make you unable to cultivate insight. They'll get in your way. So how much is dependent on how obsessed you are with them. But they're not evil. See, the 8 precepts the Buddha recommended for people who are undertaking intensive meditation courses. So the question, how should you spend your time, is, well, you'd spend it in meditation. Now, it's up to you how comfortable you feel meditating all the time. Now, especially if you don't have direct contact with a teacher, meditating a lot becomes difficult. So if you're not in a meditation course, there's really no hard and fast answer to this. Obviously the less entertainment you can engage in, the better, but the only thing I would say is it's not that significant. It's not a huge problem. Playing Sudoku or word search is not going to prevent you from becoming enlightened. It just makes it more difficult and slows you down. But the idea that you can just give it up, I guess the point is the idea that you can just give it up without doing intensive meditation is generally it's a difficult thing to do. So wouldn't worry too much about it. You have the knowledge that it's a detriment to some extent, and so try to moderate it. And if you can do without it, fine. If you can't, I wouldn't lose sleep over it. Just you know what you have to do, and if you want to increase your progress, better you can. The more time and effort you can put into actually meditating, the better. Because you can't be mindful, of course, when you're playing these games. That's the problem. That's one of the big problems. The addiction to them is another problem.
Part of me feeling good about myself is through shopping rather than contentment. Is there anything I can do to stop this emotional spending?
Meditate more. Again, these are only things that you can free yourself through insight. It's not something you can just turn off.
When I try to feel the physical sensations in the abdomen, lots of mental images of abdomen of my body and face occur between those physical sensations. It also happens when I meditate with open eyes and note seeing. Images of my face flash between seeing. Sometimes it even feels that there are more mental images than physical sensations. When I try to focus harder on just abdomen, the number of images and their persistence increases. What to do with those mental images? Should they be noted? It would be really difficult because it seems that just a couple of images can appear between physical sensations in 1 second. Thank you for your help.
Yes, they should be noted. You should note them as seeing, as long as they last. If they only last a moment, just say once seeing, and then go back to your exercise. You'll find as this is a sign, lack of stability of mind, which is natural in the beginning. But eventually your mind will become more sorted out, and they won't mix like this. Or maybe they will, they'll come back. But when they do, you just have to note them. Noting in between is not a problem. If you're saying rising and then an image comes, say seeing, and if it only lasts a moment, then let's go back to the stomach again. So this meditation is very much about being flexible, so it doesn't matter if it causes you to go back and forth. Just as long as you keep trying to come back, you don't have to force the mind to stay with the stomach. Absolutely not. When you see anything, you'd say to yourself, seeing. If it stays, you'd say seeing. If it doesn't, you'll go back to the rising, falling.
Are monks allowed to accumulate wealth and to live within their own shelter residence? If not, does a monk have no self-reliance or self-independence? Wouldn't a monk be entirely dependent upon a monastery? Would this not be a scary proposition? As well, it is a requirement for monks to live in monasteries, and how bound are monks to the monastery? What are the rules governing their freedom in terms of traveling from the monastery and whatnot?
Well, there are a lot of rules. So to some extent they're allowed to accumulate wealth, but very, very limited extent. And by wealth is just meant possessions. So there are some possessions that monks can have. Monks can't have more than one set of robes. They can't have more than one bowl. But they can have various other cloths and possessions. You can have a needle and thread and that kind of. But it's not about then relying on others. It's about not relying on anything. It's about living in poverty without those things. So without wealth. Money doesn't make you dependent. Money takes you out of the realm of of those activities that require you to spend money. You can't go to a concert or something. You can't buy things. You live without. A monk is a fairly strict and austere life, monastic life. But they're completely independent. It doesn't create dependence. The only dependence monks have is on their base requisites, and the Buddha understood this, and it was a concern, and that's why we try to address it. That's a big reason for the poverty thing, because you don't want to be dependent. So for robes, you're to collect scraps of rags that have been thrown out. for food, you're to go on alms round and just take whatever people are giving out to the poor, or or to the religious. Because in India and in any Buddhist country, people give out food to the religious. But even in Canada, I've been thinking about it. Thinking about going on alms round. The problem is I'll get started and then it'll get really, really cold in the snow. But some monks even go on alms round in the snow. A little harder in a city, in a city like this. There's no excuse really. I could go on alms round. I think maybe I've just gotten complacent. See, the thing is, once you start teaching, you get so busy and you start to give up certain things that you did before you were a teacher. I used to go on alms round everywhere. In North Hollywood, I went on alms round. I could do it here, and it's true, I am doing it. Anyway, let's not get too off track. But the point is to go with whatever is available. Like, people bring me food, so I don't need to go on alms round. But I'm not dependent on them. They desire to bring me the food. If they didn't, I'd go on alms round, or I'd go find other ways to get food. But that's the point, is to try to live with just the bare necessities. It's also why we only eat one meal in the morning. For shelter, you should be content even with staying at the foot of a tree. For medicines, you should be content with drinking your own urine, which is apparently a very good medicine. Monks don't have to live in monasteries. Wherever a monk lives, that's a monastery. But they do have to stay in one place for 3 months. Right now it's the 3-month rains, so you have to actually stay in a building. You can't stay under a tree during the rains. It's not proper, because it rains a lot. Of course, it doesn't rain a lot here, but that's the tradition, 3 months.
I have been practicing for a few months. Could I advance to noting 3 parts of a step instead of 1 part, like stepping right, stepping left? And what are the 3 words that one could use to note with? Thanks.
It's a free world. You're welcome to do whatever you want. I wouldn't give you the 3 steps personally until I've gone through the stages with you. So you'd have to, if you wanted me to give it to you, you'd have to sign up for an online course, and we'd meet every week, and after a few weeks I might give you the 2nd step and the 3rd step, even the 4th step, 5th step, 6th step. But I'll only give them to you once we've gone through some interviews. Either you come here and you do an intensive course, or we do an online course. For those interested in the online course, it's here on this site. You just go into the menu and you go to the schedule, pick a slot during the week, and then you have to actually show up, and we do video conferencing and talk about your practice. We've right now got several people doing that.
It's difficult for me to meditate at home. Somebody is always there and they have poor boundary sense. They often come in disruptively and don't really respect the meditation practice. This leads me to be on edge when meditating, that they may come in at any moment. I try to think worry, as that is the experience, but oftentimes this significantly detracts from the meditation and hurts my focus. Do you have any advice for dealing with this situation better?
Worry is the proper thing to do. There might also be disliking or frustration, but the statement that this significantly detracts from the meditation is a judgment. The idea that it hurts your focus is a judgment. This is not a problem. The problem is that you get upset about it, and that you wish it were otherwise. So don't worry about your focus. That's not where we're focusing on. Don't worry about quality of meditation. There's no such thing. Quality of meditation is in the moment, when you have a moment of clarity. Every moment that you're clearly aware. When you say to yourself, worrying, that's good meditation. If you don't like it, and you say to yourself, disliking, you think about the person coming in, thinking, or the person comes in and you hear them and you say, hearing. Or you have to open your eyes and talk to them, and it's frustrating, it angers you and annoys you. You say angry or annoyed. Every time you do that, that's good meditation. Don't worry about anything else. Focus, concentration, calm, none of that matters. I mean, all of that will come through the practice.
Does a meditator ever take Nirvana as object instead of the stomach as a point of return for the mind? Thank you, Bhante.
What would it mean to take Nibbana as the object? The only time you can actually take Nibbana as an object, well, there's two ways. One, you can conceive of it, and that's an actual tranquility meditation. But the only real way to take Nibbana as an object is to enter into Nibbana, which is, of course, that's the attainment of enlightenment. That's the goal.
You're all caught up on questions, Bhante.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your questions tonight. Thanks, Robin, for your help.
Thank you,
Good night,
Bhante.
everyone.